Okay, welcome to Tim, Ruth, and Dawn, who are going to be talking about destination cruising tonight. Tim and Heather Moses, they've been with Nepean Sailing Club as members for 17 years on their Catalina 28, and have gained, in addition to destination sailing, so much net wealth and experience here on the river, like so many of us have. Their adventures have taken them around the world, including French Polynesia, Pacific Northwest, Florida, Virgin Islands, the Solent, and Greece. And as the manager of NSC's Social Day program, Tim has organized 2 bareboat flotillas in the Virgin Islands and providing his knack for making destination dreams come true to reality. So we're going to hear about that tonight. Tim and Heather, great to see you. Ruth Mack, her love for sailing began in 2021 aboard a Tanzer 22. I think a lot of us can say that, where the thrill of the water and camaraderie captured her spirit, and she is now been around the world as well. British Virgin Islands, French Riviera, the west coast of Canada, which is right up there as well, as from what I hear, including crossing the Strait of Georgia and explorations of the Gulf Islands on the west coast there. Dawn McLaughlin, who has been at Nepean Sailing Club since 1999, and a lot of us know Dawn, but he is also has an impressive path as a sailor and organizer of charters in Georgian Bay, BVI, the Grenadines, and he is also a skipper. He is involved in Nepean's Social Day cruising program. So we're going to get a whole lot of, I think, color added to these descriptions of these places and destinations. So I think with that, let's welcome up our presenters, Tim, Ruth, and Dawn. Come on up.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. And big thank you to all the audience as well for coming out on such a questionable night. I hope we can make it entertaining for you. The subject, as Jeff mentioned, is destination sailing. So we're talking about opportunities to bring together our love of sailing and our enjoyment of travel. And in various parts of the world, Ruth and Dawn are primarily going to focus on approaches in which somebody else is setting your crew up for you. But I'm going to start off by discussing how you can set up your own crew to do a destination sailing. Establishing a crew of people that you like, people that you trust, is perhaps one of the trickiest parts of doing one of these destination sails. So I want to talk about the club's programs that help in that regard. So let's. So as I mentioned, the club does have some programs that are going to be helpful in finding and building a crew to go destination sailing with you. I'm principally going to focus on the Social Day cruising program that the club runs, but there are other options. I'll come back to this program in a little bit more detail later on. But to help explain why this is potentially a problem that needs a solution, let me start with an example, a fictitious example, of course. Let me introduce you to Jack here. So if you're familiar with the membership statistics that I think Erin has circulated, you'll know that fully 37% of the club's membership have been with the club less than 4 years. So that strongly suggests, I think, that these are not well experienced sailors. They haven't had a great deal of opportunity to establish strong, rich connections within the club. So their circle of sailing comrades is potentially quite small, but they could well have some destination sailing in their future. So let's just take a minute, and can I ask you, who here has not yet had an opportunity to go sailing in some distant cruising ground? Quite a small number then. It's not the 37% that Erin's survey might suggest. Who then? Let me ask another question. Who foresees a destination sail in their future? Quite a few more people. So hopefully the information we can provide you today, you're going to find it useful. So Jack here is in that cohort of the 37% of club members who have been with the club a relatively short period of time. He's done a basic sailing course and he's sailed a couple of seasons, every opportunity he could find on the Ottawa River. And he's starting to think that he would welcome a bigger challenge. So a bigger boat, bigger waters, a boat with more systems and challenges such as navigation and anchoring. So he definitely has a destination sail in mind, and obviously he's got to give some thought to destination, time of year to go, but perhaps the biggest challenge he faces is how can he build a crew. Fortunately, he has a large circle of friends and family and co-workers, so he's hopeful that amongst this group he's going to find people who are willing to go sailing with him. Is this from my point of view, this isn't sounding great. It's okay? Corey, you got something to? Oh, you can hear. Okay, good. So, as I say, Jack is optimistic that he's going to put together a crew out of the people that he's familiar with, but he very quickly finds out that a sizable portion of his contacts have made other plans. They're going to Mexico. They're going to Europe. So, so they, their budgets are committed. Their vacation time is committed. So let's strike them off the list. Next, much to his surprise, he finds that not everybody shares his passion of sailing. Unbelievable, I know, but spending 2 weeks in what effectively is a tiny apartment with nothing to look at but the sea. Some people are going to respond with, I'd rather watch paint dry. And in addition, there are people who are anxious about sailing. Again, this audience is going to find that surprising. But for instance, we have neighbours. When the subject comes up that we're going sailing, they get very anxious for us. They put sailing in the same category as base jumping or wingsuits, things of that nature. But these are people that 24 times a year will take the on-ramp to the 401, and I can tell you which activity I think is more dangerous. So that eliminates another sizable portion of his contact base. But next, so out of the people that are left, he thinks about some of these people, and he's prepared perhaps to spend maybe as much as an afternoon with them. These are people who potentially they have strong political views, and they love to share them with you and persuade them of the rightness of their position. Or frankly, they're boring. They brag. They have a lot of stories that they keep returning to, and guess who's the hero of these stories? It's themselves. So after this analytical process, Jack looks at the Venn diagram, and what he finds is that the intersection of these three sets of those who are available, those who are amenable, and those are tolerable, is an empty set. There's nobody amongst his contacts that he would be able to fulfill his dream of a destination sail with. So how can the sailing club help with this situation. As I mentioned, there are a number of programs like the Crew Bank, for instance, that will help him forge contacts amongst other pre-selected contacts. These are people who are already passionate about sailing, so we don't need to worry about that aspect. But I'm going to focus on the social day cruising program, and I wonder who with a show of hands, can we see if anybody in the room has not even heard of the social day cruising program? Okay, well that's good. So things are. I think if I had asked that question last year or the year before, we would have seen pretty much every hand go up. So that's an improvement. But let's take it one step further. Who feels that they actually know what the social day cruising program actually is? Maybe half or maybe a third of the audience. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what it is. So when you leave the room, you will know. So this program is basically a community of cruising sailors with a broad range of skills, everything from complete novices to people who have owned boats for decades. And they sail together once a week through the season from June to September, and the crews are shuffled amongst the boats every week. So last year, for instance, we had 80 participants in this program and 16 boats. There's a calendar. But generally, it's Fridays and Saturdays. But yeah, there is an online calendar, so you can see the dates. And I'm going to add the Saint of Circumstance to the fleet for next year. So in addition, so shuffling the participants amongst the boats week by week is a way of getting everybody to know everybody else. Typically, we would have between 25 and 30 sailors in each event, in one event. And in addition, they will meet up on the club deck for a debrief, at least we call it a debrief, after docking. So this is a good opportunity for people who are relatively new to the club, relatively new to sailing, to get to know a large number of people from which they may well be able to put together a crew for a destination sail. So the result anyway is a highly connected community of people who are enthusiastic about sailing and doing it socially. So the social aspect is just as important as the sailing aspect. Okay, that's great, but how does this actually help somebody who's relatively new to sailing to get to one of these wonderful cruising grounds and experience that environment from the deck of a boat just offshore? Well, vacations of all kinds these days, probably you've noticed, they take something like 12 months to plan anyway. Even the most basic vacation is months in the planning. Well, that's true of this kind of vacation as well. It's probably 12 months from the inspiration to actually getting on the plane and starting your vacation. And typically, charter companies are offering deals on Labor Day and US Thanksgiving. So participants in this program, starting in June of a particular year, have 4 to 6 months of rich engagement with a group of other enthusiasts to find the 4 or 5 other people that they need to join them on a destination the following spring. And so we have the group that runs this program have now had 2 opportunities to try this out. The first was in April of last year, where we had 2 boats, one skippered by Stephen here, and the other skippered by myself, and we had 12 sailors in all. This coming April, we are doing it again, same destination, the Virgin Islands. This time we have 3 boats and 19 sailors. So, and again, in this case, many of those 19 are people who have not yet had a chance to sail at a well-known sailing destination, and they're relatively new to the sailing activity. So that's my summary. That's remember, I've been talking about opportunities that the club offers for people who want to sail with people they know and like and trust, rather than rely on somebody remote to put a crew together for them. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth at this point, and she's going to talk about her experiences putting her life in the hands of others. Are you going to take this? Or okay.
Looking okay? Thanks, I know. Height. Okay. So thank you, Tim, for your thoughtful wisdom as always. And now we're going to go rogue. So let's go on a journey together before we start all this, especially with the weather that's coming in. Let's go to the south of France. Picture it. We're walking the promenade in Nice. We're looking out at the Mediterranean, at the beautiful sailboats going by. And that's where I found myself last year, wondering how the heck can I get on one of those boats instead of walking on this pebbly shore. So I went back to the hotel and Googled sail excursions Nice. And of course, umpteen hits came up, so I went and looked at them all. Well, not all of them, most of them, and I got down to 3. Click and Boat is an app, downloadable app, and it kind of caught my eye. So I looked at it a bit more, downloaded the app and went into a bit more detail. Looked too good to be true, but really what could possibly go wrong, right? So let's do this, but not without some due diligence and research first. So what I first did was I went to my own head and I thought, what do I want to get out of this excursion? So I wanted something safe. I was a solo traveler. I was with my daughter, but she doesn't sail. So wanted something safe, wanted a reputable company, wanted to be able to easily book the trip, and wanted to be able to cancel the trip as well. I wanted it somewhere close to where I was staying, around the Nice area, and I wanted to make sure that I had a captain on board who was captaining the boat. Some of the excursions that I looked at, you could rent a sailboat, but you were in charge of the sailboat. So that was my criteria. Click and Boat matched all of those criteria, plus it was interesting to me that it was a fleet that was based on the French coastline in the Mediterranean basin where I was staying, and it was also a company that had gone worldwide. So that was helpful to know as well, and they did on their website talk about how they compensate their captains, which was interesting. So seemed legit. Downloaded the app and click, 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 off we went. So the first thing that you put in with this app is where you want to go, where you want to leave from, your port, how many people are going, the date you want to go on, a sailboat or a motorboat, a skipper or no skipper. So you put that information in, you click OK, and up will pop all the boats that are available or possibly available at any one time. So on the third slide here is showing one of the boats that came up for day after tomorrow, I think I put it in for. So this boat will give you an approximate cost on what that is going to cost you for however long you've put in. Myself, I was going out usually 3 to 4 hours, usually in the morning, is what I was requesting. If you choose your boat, once you choose your boat, then you click, okay, I want to get more information, I want to request a quotation on this boat. You click that in the app, and that will automatically take you to correspondence with the captain of that boat. So then you can ask him all of the questions that you want to ask. Where am I meeting you? Am I the only one on the boat? I just want to go out for 4 hours. I want to go up to Monaco and back down to Nice. Can you do that? Anything you want to ask, you ask. One of the things that I learned in this was just from going over reviews was, even though it's a sailboat, ask about the cost of fuel, because a couple of people just in the reviews said that they were charged fuel that they weren't expecting. So just verify, verify, verify. I did my homework, I did my due diligence, and I was very picky on the captains that I chose. Also, this is France. They're on their own time. So some of the captains never got back to me. Some of them did. They would get back a couple of days later. You know, they'd answer my questions a couple of days later and then say, oh, well, let's go out this afternoon. So, there's that you have to consider, but you just do whatever works for you. There's other apps out there. It's just this was the one that I used. So my sailing playground, where I was staying, I was located here in Nice, right along the promenade. Villefranche was one of my favorite areas to go out of, and going out of Villefranche, you could go up around Monaco and back in a morning. You could also go out of Villefranche and go down around Nice itself and just out into the Mediterranean. I did give this slide to give you some of the distances, to give you an idea. So if you did have time and you wanted to go more distance and go out for the day, then that's feasible as well. Most of the places I went to were close. I did want to go down to Cannes. I was hoping to sail Nice to Antibes, Antibes to Cannes. It was too long to do in a day. I didn't know my distances, but now I do. So I took the train down to Antibes, got a boat out of Antibes, and sailed around the point to Cannes, and then just got off at Cannes. I made that arrangement with the captain that I would not be going back to Cannes with him. He was fine with that. I got off at Cannes, touristed around, and took the train back up. So lots of stuff that you can do. The experience, I mean, the pictures speak for themselves, I think. So had to come home, get back to work, and then my friends called who live in BC and said, hey, we have a hunter. Why don't you come out and come sailing with us along the Gulf Islands in BC? So I hopped a plane. Didn't take much convincing. Hopped a plane, went out and met them. They're out of Genoa Bay, which is where this red boat, I'm actually standing on their hunter taking this picture of their dockmate, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So remember this boat. And these are just some of the other, that's one of the other docks that we were at whenever I went out with them. So very spoiled by friends out there. They took me through a few of the Gulf Islands, decided I wanted to see more because it was such a spectacular place. So looked to do a mileage builder and navigation course. Went back to Googled all the different courses that were available, and settled on Captain Mac's School of Seamanship. So this is, remember that red boat I was just talking about? This is actually on Ben and Lois's hunter. Again, that's Ben and Lois, and they took me to Salt Spring Island, Cowichan Bay, and all their little sailing area in here. Ben told me to go over and meet his dockmate, which I did, who owns that red boat. And it turns out he takes people out on excursions. So he actually took a couple across the Pacific to Hawaii. So he's in my back pocket for someday. Don't know when, but so it just shows, like, just talk to people and get to know people on docks, and you get opportunities that way as well. So Captain Mac, back over to Vancouver now. I'm ready to go on my week-long trip with him and learn something. So he was out of New Westminster, which is over here. And the plan was to come across the Strait of Georgia and go all up through as many islands as we could, weather dependent, of course, cross the strait again, and then come back down to New Westminster. He came highly credentialed. He had a 42-foot custom sloop, so off we went. I had asked a couple of questions because I was a solo sailor again. I wanted to have a cabin just to myself. And so I asked if I had a private cabin. He said, yeah, don't worry about it. He was going to provide all the food, and it just sounded good. So that morning I went, I met him for the first time, and I met my crew for the first time, unlike what Tim just advised us never to do. So thankfully, this crew was incredible. So we bonded instantly. This is This is a young couple who came on. They were from New Westminster, from Vancouver. Young couple, a really active group, and they just wanted to do something active and somewhat romantic, they were thinking, you know, go learn how to sail. It was going to be cool. So they came with us, Deb and Daryl, and this is Ethan, and Ethan's kind of a free spirit kind of guy. He has a place up north of Vancouver on the coast, and his goal is to sort of have people come up to his place, and he'll take them fishing and sea kayaking and eventually sailing, which he definitely will because he caught on to sailing really quickly. So we had taken all of our step bags and thrown them down under in the companionway, and off we went. So that night, we really got to know each other because, as it turned out, Deb and Daryl's romantic interlude for the week was going to be these bunk beds over here. And right across the way was Ethan and I, who met that morning. So my private bunk was supposed to be this one that had the curtain across it. But it was the bigger bunk, and Ethan was a bigger guy, so I said, you take it, because it's really not going to matter at this point. And those were our quarters. And Deb and I kind of joked because she and I held hands more than her and her husband did. We were in closer proximity. Our wash station was one sink for all of us, and there was a head across from that. So that was what we were on. Shower facilities were going to be at docks along the way, so at anchorages along the way. So he did have food for us. There was wine with every meal. We were encouraged in part of our planning to bring the drink of choice if we wanted to have an after-dinner drink. So of course, I brought gin. No, really? I know. Shocking. So hold up, because our first anchorage was here, and at the end of the dock was the Gin Palace Yacht Club. I mean, how apropos was that? So we pulled into Valdez Island on our first, after we crossed the sea, which took us all day, pulled into this little bay inlet, and we were able to do a lot of maneuvering with the boat, and he made us, each of us had to anchor the boat, or sorry, not anchor, dock the boat. So that was day one. So it was fast and furious, and then Captain Mac here made us beautiful smoked salmon on the barbecue on the back of the boat, while the four of us went all through the island, hiking through the island, and then down the coastline on the other side, and came back to a beautiful meal that was already made. And then I got them all hooked on gin. So it worked out well. So that was us leaving, and this was the rest of the week, basically. So we learned a lot, and we just lucked out on weather. And this is Canada. This is our country, and right now, like, yay! We don't need to go anywhere else. This is phenomenal. So what did we do? We moored, we did different mooring. Every time was different. So this is at Protection Island, which is the coolest little island. All the residents go around in golf carts. There's not many of them, but the ones that are there do. Captain Mac's been going there so often that his docking spot is right outside the Dinghy Dock pub. So that's where we spent the night there. Another time was just on an island down here. This is Deb coming into Gibson's, which was the busiest and tightest anchorage that we had. So we had to come in to this port, come down this slip here, and do I call it doing a George, did a 180, and then there was no slip available, so we actually had to raft up against this other boat here, which he was fine with, so it was great. We learned tides and currents, because I had never done tides or currents, so learned all kinds of stuff about tides and currents, did navigating, man overboard technique often, and really got to know each other. So our crew was tight. Like I said, we bonded instantly the first day. We had a little bit of this with our captain, but all was good in the end. So I think because we got so tight as a crew right away, we just bonded. So heading home, it was an incredible experience. We're friends for life. We're going to go out again this summer, hopefully out in Vancouver somewhere sailing. Ethan's down in Venezuela somewhere right now. Deb and Daryl went over to South Africa for December and January. So we're trying to hook up. So much learned and many, many reflections that I'll have for a lifetime. And one of them was kind of serendipitous because on the flight home, we flew over Lac du Chien, and Nepean Sailing Club was right out my window. So all I could think of was Tim's beautiful Cariad with its spectacular spinnaker, and all that Lac du Chien has to offer. So the pirate ship that comes around, Stephen defending us against the pirate ship that comes around, and this incredible group of captains that Tim has assembled for the social day cruising. I'm trying to, okay, so Paul, I know you guys are here, but like my heart is just very full. So all of these guys, I won't name them, but I should. But they're all incredible, and if it weren't for you guys, for your wisdom, Sylvie, I know you're there, I see Paul, I see Jeff, Tim and Dawn, of course. But if it weren't for your wisdom and patience and generosity of teaching me and letting me understand what sailing is about, I never would have done any of that stuff. So with that, I hand it over to Captain Dawn.
So my part of this is to really talk a little bit about the chartering and some of the logistics that kind of go into planning one of these trips. And there's a few different ways to go about putting these trips together. For the most part, though, at the end of the day, it's really about getting on a boat with people, living on board, sailing every day, getting somewhere else, relaxing, having a great time. So that goes without saying. But there are a few things then to consider when you start down that road of planning. And the first thing really, before we get into the actual charter part, is to actually start talking about where you're actually going to go, choosing a destination, because choosing a sailing destination is a little different than choosing a land-based vacation, because sailing conditions vary so much around the world. You're going to find the charter company may ask for you and your crew to have some additional experience that you may or may not have, and some questionnaires and so forth. So different places around the world, you deal with winds. It's nice to sail Virgin Islands, 15, 20 knot winds, pretty steady out of the east. They don't vary a whole lot. Go over to the Mediterranean, you're dealing with 30 knot winds that can go wild in a day, and that can be part of the fun. But I've also noticed over the years, and you guys probably will too as you go down the chartering road, chartering is very often a group activity, and we like to go with family and friends, and very often we'll wrap up the boat with some friends, neighbors who may not be sailors. And if you take them sailing with you and you're in a place doing 30 knot winds, they may be looking at you either having the time of their life or wondering what the heck you've got them into. So if you're planning a trip, you got to give some thought to where you're going and what the conditions are going to be like as they relate to your crew. Some places you might need some navigation skills, so the charter company may prompt you a little bit for that. Some places, the islands, destinations are all close together, so you leave one island, you can see the place you're going, so they refer to that as line of sight. Go to Greece, you leave one island, you don't even know where you're going, it's way on the other side of the horizon, 7 hours away, completely different sailing experience. So do you know how to navigate a boat? Now today's modern charter boats, they've all got GPS and we've all got phones with apps and all that on it, so you're probably not going to run into any trouble. But, if your electronics die or your batteries aren't holding a charge, you could find yourself plotting a course in the middle of nowhere. Do you know how to do that? Ruth mentioned with her BC trip, tides and currents. That's also part of the game if you're sailing in an area where you're fighting those. You sometimes have to plan your trip so you're entering into a passage at the right time of day. You don't want to be going into something at 8 knots when the tide's coming at you, the current's coming at you at 12 knots. That could make a long, frustrating day. So those are some of the things to consider at when you're choosing a destination. I didn't put it out there, but also a lot of us have our Canadian Yacht Association courses and so forth. For anybody who thinks of, I don't know if you can hear me well or not, but yeah, okay. If you're thinking of Europe as a possible destination, there's other certifications that enter into the mix as well. The ICC is the kind of the big one where, can you sail in an international destination? So it's an additional courses and study and really a deep dive into your previous experience. They're not here tonight, but I'll do a little shout out for Advantage Boating. You can get prep for all of these things. Their navigation course gets into the navigation as well as the tides and currents, and they can prep you for the ICC as well, if for anybody who's thinking of that as down the road. So the point with this slide really is to tell you, it's easy to get on a plane and go to Paris, go to Rome or whatever. If you're choosing a sailing destination, you got to think of what it's going to be like when you get there at the other end, okay? So that was kind of the start. Now, as we move into the actual types of chartering that are going to be taking place, again, lots of similarities, but what changes, who you're sailing with, how much sailing you're doing, how much planning you're doing. That's what really starts to vary from charter type to charter type. So the first one I just want to go through is the charter. Should I do the right one? There we go. In the industry, they call this a bareboat charter. This is the charter where you do all the work. Now, I say you, but I mean you and your crew. And I say all the work, and that's the sailing part, but also all of the upfront planning that goes into it. And there's a lot that goes into planning these trips, as Tim alluded to. Just a word on the phrase bareboat. To me, it's always have a negative kind of vibe to it. A bareboat, what does that mean? A lousy boat, falling apart boat that's missing stuff. Bareboat refers not so much to the physical boat, but the who's operating it. So with a bareboat charter, then you're not getting a boat with a captain or a skipper. That's a different type of charter. Got a slide for that coming up. We'll get to that one. A bareboat, when it comes to the crew, you do everything. So one of you guys will be the skipper. You'll all take turns cooking meals and so forth. So boat doesn't come with a chef to prepare your meals and all that. You're basically doing everything. So the everything part is all of the upfront stuff. So picking a destination, picking your dates, talking to charter companies, finding a boat that fits your needs, your budget, can handle all the people in your crew, putting together a crew, and we gave you lots of info on that one. Tim did, thank you. And planning out your provisioning. So are you going to make meals on the boat? Are you going to eat on shore? Planning out an itinerary. Are you going to stay in marinas? Are you going to drop the hook and anchor every night? All of these things are kind of set in advance. The great thing about bareboat chartering, though, is most of these plans, well, once you get beyond, you book the boat and you're ready to go, but when you get into provisioning and itinerary, you can change them on the fly. You're not carved in stone here, which is going to be a little different from one of the other charters I'm going to talk about here. Sometimes, the charter you're on, not the bareboat, it's a very structured, rigid trip that you follow. Bareboat gives you the option to really kind of be flexible. So I should have read these slides before I get up here. Okay, the thing with bareboat, though, is because you're not coming with a skipper to kind of run the show, you are going to need a couple of people that are familiar with sailing, have some experience. That's not us telling you that. The charter company will demand it. They're not going to hand over what could be a $500,000 boat to half a dozen people who don't sail or have limited sailing experience. So part of your recruiting, your circles that Tim's talking about earlier, you need to have people have some sailing experience. And to that end, the charter company will usually ask for what they call a sailing resume, which is just simply a detailed document where you outline all of your sailing experience. So years of experience, what types of boats you've sailed, where you've sailed, have you done charters before, do you have any courses, certifications, all this stuff bundles together into what's called your sailing resume. I don't know if there's any new sailors here. I was trying to watch the hands that went up. As part of the social group, whenever I'm out on every week with Fridays and Saturdays, whenever I have new sailors on board, like we get a lot of folks coming in who've just finished their basic, I always suggest it's a good idea that you keep track of, you log your hours that you're doing, especially early in your sailing career. Because if chartering's in your future, if you're thinking of it, that's going to be one of the things the charter company's going to want to know before they, as I said, charter you a boat. So you'll need one or two of them on your crew in that. Size of the boats for chartering, for us who are called pleasure craft operators, usually between 40 and 55 feet. Once you get beyond that, it's a lot of boat to handle, but you're technically getting out of a pleasure craft boat and into a passenger ship, and there's a definition. If the boat can handle 13 people, it's a passenger ship. So that's usually, again, into the 60, 70-foot range. So that's not going to be something you're going to be looking at chartering. At the other end of the scale, the 40 is kind of arbitrary. You'll just simply find many charter companies don't have many charter boats less than 40 feet. They will have some. One of the first charters I did with some of the guys here at the club, we chartered up in Georgian Bay, and we chartered a 37-foot Gibsy. This was 20 years ago. It was the smallest boat in their fleet. It was the cheapest boat in their fleet, and that's really what sort of drove the decision. With bigger boats, bigger budgets. Okay, the bigger the boat, the more you pay for it. But generally, when you're looking at the charter companies, it's around 40 to about 55. The big difference between them, besides the obvious size, is, let me just kind of do the crew size here, is really going to be in the cabins, the channels, the accommodations. Bigger boats will have a few more amenities on it. If you're going to the tropics, you might want air conditioning on your boat. But the big thing is going to be the number of cabins, which can handle 2 people. That's pretty well the number there. The cabins are not big, and if you've not been on a charter boat, and I think a lot of you probably have, but charter boats, the cabins are not hotel-sized rooms. They're not stateroom-sized rooms. They're pretty small. If anybody is a little claustrophobic, you might challenge with some of that. But I find the big thing when I've talked to people about these trips is the number of cabins also impacts the number of heads. Bigger boats with four cabins are going to have 4 heads. Smaller boats with 3 cabins, there's only going to be a couple of heads on it, which are going to be shared. And I've just, everybody I've talked to over the years, everybody wants to know about the bathroom situation on the boat, right? And they don't ask you. They always whisper it. So what about the bathroom? I said, what? You know, I say, no. Oh, yeah, the head. Anyway, but if you're planning a charter, if a private bathroom's important, you're going to be looking at a bigger boat, really. That's almost by definition, okay? So that's something to consider. Okay, I'm going to go back to this. So that's basically bareboat chartering. If you're new to sailing, you might not have the experience to do that. If you're also new to sailing and you're new to a sailing club, you might not know enough people, because the definition of bareboat chartering really is about kind of drawing upon your own circle of friends and that who you would do this trip with. If that doesn't work for you because you simply don't know enough people, you don't have enough experience to charter, the next charter option is to actually join a charter that's being organized by somebody else. So rather than you do all the work, all of that planning itineraries and provisioning and all that, let somebody else do it, and you just sort of show up as one of the crew. And you can do these trips really all around the world. They're called flotillas. The definition, flotilla, a bunch of boats. So you'd be a member on a crew on a boat, but you could be part of a group of boats, 4, 5, 6 boats, depending on the overall all size of it. So these are usually organized not by you, but by somebody from a sailing club, a sailing school. Sometimes even a charter company will put together one of these flotillas. They'll take half a dozen of their boats, set them aside for a couple of weeks, at some point of the year, and essentially sell off the cabins one by one. And that way, again, you're not trying to put together a crew. You're just showing up with a valid credit card, and you're in. Now, with this one, you'll have to, pretty well everybody fills out what they call a sailing resume. Again, that list of all your background experience that you have. But it's the organizers that put the crew together. So they'll decide based on the experience who's with who. So that way, if I don't have much experience, they'll put me on a boat with people who do. So that takes care of that part. If any of you pursue this and you happen to be very experienced sailors, you may find you're asked to be a skipper on one of these boats. And are you willing to take on people with less experience and sort of kind of play a leadership role and do a bit of guidance, mentoring, coaching throughout the week? So that's one of the big differences there. Now, for a lot of people, when they start hearing about this part, getting on a boat with people I don't know, for some people that's part of the fun. For other people, that's a showstopper. Not going to do it, right? Some people I find are particular about who they sail with. They only want to sail with people they know, people they've sailed with up here. So flotilla is, I'm not sure I want to do that. I'll just tell you from my own experience, I've done about a half dozen of these trips where literally I've gotten on boats with people I didn't know. Sometimes I met them literally at the dock, sometimes on the plane on the way down. But really, people, I have no idea who you are. They've always worked out fine. So again, I find I'm telling people a lot, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine. People as adults, yeah, you'll get along fine. And you've all got an interest in sailing. You've all decided to go sailing instead of going to a resort or going on a cruise ship. Yeah, sailing is what's attracted you, as well as everybody else on the boat. So if there's a reason not to do a flotilla trip, don't let the concern about, I have no idea who I'm going to be sailing with, be the deciding factor not to go, because it'll work out pretty good. That's the big difference between a bareboat and a flotilla. The other ones that probably are no big deal, but I'll just mention them anyway. If you join a flotilla, you don't have a say in the dates. They're all set by the organizer, which, you know, it's got to work around your time off from work and things of that nature. You don't get a say into the type of boats. Most flotillas are a mix of sort of catamaranes and monohulls. Everybody wants to be on a cat these days. You pay more for that, but they are bigger, a little more spacious. And we can argue about how well they sail or don't sail, but you know, they're fun at the end of the day when you drop the hook. But once the boats are full, for these organized flotillas, once these boats fill up, they're done. So you know, if you might find you want to be on a cat, the cats are all full, and the last available space is a spot on a monohull, and you'll decide then whether or not you'll take it then. So you're not going to have a say in all of that. Another concern, not a concern, another thing I think to consider for a flotilla, and this one might be something for some people, is you're not going to have a say in the itinerary that they follow. And these are sailing vacations, so there's an emphasis on the sailing. Duh, everybody gets that. It's also a vacation. And I've noticed these flotillas that are organized by other folks, you know, other organizations, they tend to map out a route that kind of follows a tourist route. So the best beaches, the popular snorkeling spots, the national parks, you know, the bars and all that, which is fine when you're going there for the first time. But if you're envisioning a sailing trip where you're going to be kind of in an isolated anchorage, out of the way, under a full moon in the stars, got the whole place to yourself, you're not really going to get that experience on a flotilla. You can get it on a bareboat charter because you will choose your own itinerary. Here it's being chosen for you. So that's something that, again, some people might want to take into account. They fill the boats for flotillas if you sign up for it. If you go with your partner, you'll get a cabin. If you sign up as a solo traveler, you'll be assigned a cabin mate to go with you, usually. And it's a member of the same gender, same sex, and that. Till Ruth told me her story about her cabin mate, and I kind of blew that thought out the window. I said, really? That? Anyway. But that's usually the case. Some flotillas, the organizers will offer you a single supplement to pay a little extra to get your own spot, like any other kind of touring group and all of that. So now another thing about flotillas, because this one might be something for some people around here as well, whoever organizes the flotilla will be with you. So they'll be with you on the trip. And usually their role is to kind of a social hostess type of thing, keeping things moving, passing along information. If there's a change in the weather, they make sure everybody's aware of it. So we're going to go somewhere else today. You know, got to change your itinerary. But often on these trips, there's somebody, and for lack of a better word, I'm going to call them an engineer. And there's somebody who's along to provide technical support, mechanical support as needed, but also some guidance to things like docking the boat and anchoring the boat. And I've met a lot of folks around here that when they sail, you know, you go out for an afternoon, you go out for an evening, you're in a race, you know, you go out for racing or whatever, and then 4 or 5 hours later, you come back, you're in your slip, and that's the end of it. So you're used to your own slip, and that's really about it. But if you go sailing in foreign land, bigger boat, unfamiliar waters, not sure about the holding and all that, yeah, okay, this is all kind of new to me. So I might want a little assistance in docking a boat, because I don't dock very much, or I don't anchor very much. So that's another advantage that some of these flotillas will offer you as well. So if you're on a flotilla organized by a charter company, and you need help, kind of, especially if you're in places like the Mediterranean where docking is a little different than what we got out here, yeah, I might need a little assistance kind of squeezing the boat in or backing the boat in as the case may be. So they're able to provide you that kind of support, which is really, really quite useful if needed in that, okay? So, okay, so that's a flotilla trip. Get beyond the not knowing the people that you're going to be on the boat with, and it'll be fine, because as Ruth pointed out, you typically bond on these trips. You can't help but sail with people for a week and not create some bonds in doing that. Now, the other charter type I wanted to mention was the idea, if you're new to sailing, don't have a huge circle of sailing friends to draw upon for this trip. Can't find anybody who's willing to take on the role of skippering, because you do need that as part of the boat. Or if you're sailing with a young family, you've got kids along, and you kind of got to keep an eye on them while you're trying to watch that other guy coming in on a port tack, and does he know the rules? Is he going to get out of the way or not? You know what? I want some help for this. So hiring a skipper is another option for a charter trip. Keyword is hire. There's an additional financial cost to this above and beyond everything else that goes with the trip. It's around $200, $250 per day, at least in the Caribbean. That's what it's going for. 200 is more pre-COVID type of thing. The rates have gone up in a little bit. But that's not the only thing you'll pay for in all of this. The skipper gets their own cabin on the boat. So, and it'll tell you that right in the website, right in the contract you sign. So if you happen to be 3 couples chartering a 3-cabin boat, one of you is either giving up your cabin or for the skipper, or else you get a bigger boat, or get a 4-cabin boat, which would be an extra cost. You pay for the provisioning if you hire a skipper, so you got to keep them fed and filled with drink. Basically, unless there's any kind of food allergies or something like that, they'll basically eat what you eat. So provisioning is not going to add a whole lot, but it will add up. And at the end of the week, the end of the trip, there's a gratuity, 15 to 20%, which on the boat, which also is going to add up. So if you are looking at hiring a skipper for this trip, for a trip, it doesn't take much to get the north side of $2,000 easily when you're doing that. The good news, though, if you're looking at hiring a skipper, is you don't have to try to find this person. The charter company will do it for you. You simply tell them, I want to charter a boat, and I want to hire a skipper to go with it. They have a ready list of people they can just draw upon to do exactly that. If you bring your own, or bring your own skipper along, let's say you've got a neighbor who does this for a living, the charter company will want to vet them, talk to them, make sure they're eligible, qualified, and so forth. If you're bringing that person to another country, technically they're working. That takes us into the road of taxes, visas, work permits, and things like that. And so that's something to consider and all that. So that's basically the main parts of sort of chartering. There are other ways to end up on a boat. We didn't really spend too much time talking about it, but outside of sort of a vacation type of trip, there's also the idea of sort of joining up as a crew, helping a boat do a passage from here to there. People who want their boats moved from Halifax to the Caribbean or something like that, join up. They're sometimes willing to take on an outsider as a member of the crew. So that could be another option for people who are looking to get some time on a boat. Wanted to do one slide on the cost. That's always a big question that comes up as well. So, oops, try that again. There we go. If you're planning one of these trips and you're price the whole thing out, what do you pay for? Because the boat, where you're going, the type of boat you're getting and all that can vary a lot. It's difficult to say this trip will cost you X amount of dollars. But here's basically what you're paying for. 4 things. Okay, there's the boat itself. This is a shared cost, so depending on the number of people on the boat, you'll share the cost in one formula or another. Getting your own cabin, private cabin, if you're traveling solo, there's usually a premium that's paid for that. The cost of the boat will be driven by the size of the boat, the age of the boat. Newer boats cost more than older boats and so forth. Catamaranes cost more than monohulls and that. So can't really give you a number is where I'm going with all of that. The other costs, airfare, depends on where you go, depends on when you go as well. Sailing tends to be one of those things that's really impacted between high season and off season, and the prices for the boats and airfares can vary quite a lot. The boat and the airfare is going to be about 75% of your overall costs. The other two expenses, provisioning, that's your groceries, supplies for the boat that you'll either order in advance or buy when you get down there. This comes at the end of sort of planning a meal, figuring out what you're going to eat on board, or if you're going to eat on shore at restaurants and so forth. Spending money is pretty basic, just every time you open your wallet, and drinks in a bar, meal in a restaurant, souvenirs and what have you, okay? So that's really where your costs are going to be for all of that. So, okay. All right. So I kind of whipped through that as quickly. I was torn between how much detail, but anyway, we can take questions at the end if we're still ahead of the storm. So that's my part. So it's never too early to start planning a charter, and yeah, so we'll see you down in the Virgin Islands, I guess, or the Grenadines in the next year or so. There you go.
Thank you, John.
Hey.
So how are things looking on the storm front? Are we okay to carry on for a little while? Not snowing, okay, good. So obviously, if anybody has questions, we would like to do our best to address them. There is a microphone in the center there. Nope.
Good evening. Just a couple of comments. I've been on flotillas 3 times in Greece. One of the advantages of the flotillas is that the crew on the lead boat will know if a particular anchorage or harbor is full, and what time you need to get there to make sure you've got a spot. The other thing is that the way it worked out for our charters, it was basically we put together the crew for the boat, so we weren't dealing with strangers. It was just my wife and myself and another couple.
Mm-hmm. Excellent points. Do you have any comment?
Not really. I mean, that's one way that'll unfold as well. My flotilla experience has always been sort of approaching sailing schools and clubs about just sort of, because I tend to sail on my own, and not just kind of, you've got, sorry. Thought I was talking loud enough. Yeah, my experience with, how's that? Good? Okay. Okay. All right, yeah, so my experience is just, I go to these sailing clubs that are organized by, these flotillas organized by sailing clubs, and just kind of go with that. Our flotilla in April was kind of a mix of a bareboat and a flotilla. We had more than one boat, but we because of the social sailing, day sailing we were doing, we all kind of knew each other a little bit before the actual trip. So, but flotillas are still great for those who are, again, coming up short with people that or friends don't want to do it, or this isn't the right time, and things like that. That's it. So, anyway.
Yeah. So another piece of our experience, I suppose, Heather and I have done flotillas both in the Caribbean and in the Cyclades, and I get the sense that in Europe, maybe some of the people who go sailing aren't so experienced, so the flotilla leaders tend to supervise a little bit more closely than they do in the Caribbean. But yeah, excellent points. So we had a question in the front.
Hi, I've never chartered a boat before, but it's definitely something I'm interested in, and I've been speaking with some people, and somebody had mentioned to me, and I just was wondering if you knew any information on that, that you used to just need a sailing resume for chartering boats in the Caribbean, but now it's changed and you need an international boating license. Is that true? When you went, did you have just the resume, or do you need a different type of license? I'm just curious about that as a novice sailor.
Yeah, Europe is a lot more strict than North America. So I think probably throughout the Mediterranean, you need an international certificate of competence, or equivalent. In the Caribbean, it's much more common for the charter company to do their own evaluation of your resume. So yes, they will expect you to submit a logbook. They will expect you to have had some courses, some certificate courses, and some experience. But yeah, it's a little bit more rigorous in Europe. Don, do you have a comment?
No, that's pretty well done. I was reading up on the ICC today, and believe it or not, it's something that came out of the United Nations and setting up all of these rules for different places to sail. And basically, Canada and the U.S. and the Caribbean are not part of that. So they decide on them. The companies, the islands, whatever, they decide on their own what they look for in that. And the sailing resume will do the trick. And they do reserve the right, though, to say no. Like, you could submit a resume and they'll look at it and say that no, that's not enough experience. Or when you get down there, they always do what they call a boat checkout. They'll walk you through all the systems on the boat and that. And in theory, if it looks like you kind of are a little in unfamiliar territory here, they reserve the right then to say as well, we think you should take a skipper out and literally make you hire a skipper on the spot. I don't think that happens too often, but they do reserve the right. So for first-time charters, Caribbean's a great place to go. Do you need the big heavy-duty certificate? No, you're not. If you're going to Europe, and I should also say it's really for the skippers that where this is really going to be critical. If you're a passenger or member of the crew, it's less so. Okay.
Do you have a particular destination that you're fond of?
Well, of course, the BVI is quite popular, and that would be amazing. But ideally, I'd like to start in Georgian Bay, as I was speaking with Don earlier. And obviously, you don't need anything international for that. But just off of Manitoulin Island, I was looking at charters. And I think that would be a great place to start, and very beautiful. And like Ruth said, here in Canada.
Another question?
Yes. Elizabeth, what do you do when you go with a bareboat to check that the boat is in good conditions and sails are fine? You will discover the sail when you hoist them, and things like that. So is there a minimum of check? And what do you expect from the chartering company for the support? Is there things you do there?
Those are excellent questions. In terms of on-the-water support, it's a good idea to research what kind of guarantee the charter company offers before you start out. Like anything, the more you pay, the better the chance that you will have a reliable boat, I would say. There are certainly horror stories. And you can, you will have somebody check out the boat with you, but it's, they will do it in under an hour. And you probably don't get a chance to test all of the systems. And of course, they can't guarantee that any of the systems won't fail during the course of your charter. So yeah, I think you're right in pointing to a risk factor there. Don, would you add to that?
Check the safety equipment. That would be good. And then the extra tiller, things like that, because if it's like Murphy's Law, if things will go wrong, they will.
Yeah, you can do as much as you possibly can before you leave the boat. Leave the dock. So everything from raising the sails and all and that. There's a checklist they go through. Safety equipment is key thing, but they do the rigging, the electronics, the water system, so water pump the head, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they've only the turnaround time between the time the last charterer got off the boat and you're getting on your boat to start your charter is very minimal. It's sometimes 4 or 5 hours, and that's really not enough time to do a real thorough bow to stern type of checkup on that. So if you're evaluating charter companies, one of the things you might want to look at is what is their rules on support, and if you lose a day sailing because of something that goes wrong, can they replace the boat? The boat we had originally planned for April was a monohull that literally 4 days before we got there, the previous charterers, I think they drove it onto a reef or something, and it basically came out of service. And the charter company was able to replace it with a 45-foot cat, which was really great. But we happen to be using a pretty big charter company, so they have boats available to do that. If you use a smaller charter company, we just lost a boat, they may not be able to replace it because they don't have anything available for you, and here you're getting there in 3 days, so that can be problematic. So asking questions about what is the support plan, what is the, to do that are always good.
So just a couple comments on that from our trip last April. We were given a checklist to go through, and you could make a list of things that you wanted them to fix, and there just wasn't time. So our wind decks, our wind instruments at the top of the mast weren't working. Well, did we really need that to sail? No, not essential, but they were going to fix it, and they had to get the techs going up the mast, but then the rain came and they wouldn't go up in the rain, so it didn't get fixed. So we sailed with some deficiencies that didn't really influence the quality of our time. I mean,
one of the things often the bow thruster. If it's a large boat, that might be the bow thruster that is not working. So that means more challenge for piloting in narrow environment.
yeah, in our case, it wasn't a matter of safety issues per se. The other thing was that they guaranteed that if there were an issue, they would get to us within 4 hours to fix anything. Yeah. British Virgin Islands. Yeah.
The 4 sorry. Yeah, I'll just, the 4 hour window that they gave us is common in the BVIs. If you're in the Grenadines and you leave St. Vincent or Grenada and you're going one direction only, after a couple of days, that's not really an option. And, this goes back to experience part of, BVIs is it's a great place for anybody doing a first time, second time charter. Once you get more experience and you can do a bit more troubleshooting on the boat if it's needed, it's always a big if it's needed, then you can start looking at other places where, you're on the boat, you're on the ground, they'll be on the phone with you and you're going to be troubleshooting the systems of that, right? So anyway. Good.
Don, have you figured out a way how to get a guitar on board, or is that disrespectful to the others?
Bring one.
How do you do it? A traveler guitar?
Yeah,
Or?
so, I got a traveler guitar, which is about 3/4 the size of a regular guitar, and it's carry-on luggage for the big jet. Not so much on the, actually, that's actually a good point. So I do carry a guitar with me, so it's, like I said, I can carry it on a plane, so I don't check it, but when you do go to some of these locations, use the major airlines to get you most of the way. If you do start flying on some of the smaller airlines in the region, so the Caribbean's got 2 or 3 regional airlines, the rules on carry-on luggage, weight, size, all that stuff, they are strictly enforced when that, and it's, it's basically the size of the planes that they have and all that. They can't always accommodate everything, so that's that. And but much to the annoyance of my crew that I'm with, they got to put up with it. Sorry, guys.
I've heard them singing at Penny's Point, and it's not to the annoyance. But what a fantastic talk from Tim, Don, and Ruth. Great interactive presentation tonight, guys. Thank you very much. We have a small token of our appreciation, and they happen to be the handiwork of Mark Edwards, who's one of our crew, and it's a wonderful gift. But thank you all very much. Tim, we don't have one with your name. We have 2 with Ruth, so we're going to give one to Ruth. Thank you so much, guys. Very, very great job. I'll mention that we raised tonight.